everybody. Welcome to another episode of Football Asides. I'm your host, Glo, and joining me on the other end of the line is my co-host, Dan. Dan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, thank you. Such a treat. Been watching some Bundesliga lately, so that's been a lot of fun.
That's lovely. Yeah, it's been very nice to have actual live football that I can't just Google what the outcome is. So that's been a really nice change of pace.
Completely agree. Yeah, exactly.
How much were you excited? Just as excited on the first weekend as the second?
Oh, for sure. I live in the Pacific Standard Time Zone, so my weekend mornings often are, watching football, having breakfast. That's pretty standard in my household. So just being able to start those weekends off again like that has been such a treat.
Speaking of treats, though, the best part of the return of top flight football, I should say, there has been some football, the Romanian League and the K League, but top five league football has been the German word Geisterspiel. I apologize, my German is non-existent, but
Okay,
it
what does
means
this mean?
it means ghost games. So instead of games behind closed doors, that's just really what their term for it is. And I think it captures the spirit of what's going on more than any other term I've had before.
Interesting.
So
Interesting. I
I've
hadn't
been
heard that.
enjoying it.
That's great. So you've been able to watch too on the weekends?
Yes. So I have I have this app that is a football app that is absolutely synced to my calendar. So all the games are just like popping up back to back, and I
That's
just like
awesome.
sit in different places in my house and watch the games.
Yeah. Which app is that?
I use FootMob,
Yeah, me too.
which I absolutely
such a
love.
great app. Yeah. That's like my go-to. And the Norwegians, of course, put that app together, and they always, whatever they touch, it turns to solid gold.
Yeah, I would say at least in this particular incident, stellar work. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Never gone back. I think I've had it for almost 4 years now, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
Probably more than 4 years, I should say.
Speaking of Norwegians, Holland scored again.
I keep waiting for him to regress to the mean, because you're like, oh yeah, like this
Regress
makes
to
sense,
the
blah blah
mean.
blah, but statistics, you have to
Amazing.
eventually regress to the mean.
I know, right?
And he's just like, no,
Glow,
just not
he's the
having
real
it.
deal. He's the real deal.
I mean, if he keeps at it, and I just enjoy how much of a moody teenager he is in
Yeah,
his interviews,
exactly.
just absolutely cannot be bothered after a certain point, which can rub people the wrong way, but I find it very entertaining. Just like he doesn't want, he's over this.
Yeah. So what's impressed you so far? Like what have you seen that really caught your eye?
Yeah, so obviously we can't go through all the games, but I think on the whole, I've been very impressed by the quality of football. Even without fans, knowing how much time they've had out, really like only recently starting to train as a full team, but before only had small sided training sessions.
Totally.
I really did expect a dramatic drop in quality, and I've been pleasantly surprised. I had like a really good time watching the Dortmund game earlier this weekend. That was really lovely, and Leipzig is just a machine that was
Totally.
just quite really great to watch.
That's awesome.
Berlin was a bit disappointed in that. I wanted them to do well.
Yeah, do you have a bit of a soft spot for Union Berlin?
I really do, I think. I've absolutely, of all the places I've been to Germany, which is truly 3, so really not much to speak of, but Berlin has like a very soft spot in my heart. So,
Neat.
and I
Okay.
like the story of the club. There's a certain like romance to it that I'm drawn to.
I heard one group of fans talking about this particular competition and how they invited all their supporters to come watch the competition live in their stadium, and but the rule was you had to bring your own couch, and so they had just like thousands of supporters on the pitch with their couches. So like you said, there's quite a unique culture there, it sounds like, and a wonderful following.
Yeah, I think it is truly one of the last like top flight teams that has such a deep connection to its local fans, and they seem to be just as involved in every step of their way. And I think that is something that is going away. It's at least, yeah, it's less and less frequent. So I adore that.
Yeah, for sure.
What have you found most impressive in the
You know-
Bundesliga's return?
Totally. Two things. I will admit, I know a lot of German fans won't like me for this, but I am a bit of a Leipzig fan because of Emil Forsberg. I've been a huge fan of his for a couple of years now. And watching Leipzig, and I've just been so impressed with their youth. I was looking at it, and they had only 3 players on that starting lineup that were above the age of 24. And that includes the goalkeeper, who's 30. And realistically, goalkeepers, I mean, that's kind of like their prime age anyway, right? So it's just such an example of the youth in this league and the importance that they place on developing their talent, which I so appreciate. And, it's great to see, obviously, players like Alphonso Davies, of course, one of our Canadian hopefuls here, getting playing time. And you see a lot of youth. I'm so impressed with how many American players are playing in the Bundesliga right now as well. A lot of them are getting playing time. So
yeah, Gio Reyna finally got some minutes after being injured during the fast return for the Riviera Derby earlier. So it's finally getting some minutes.
Totally.
Been loving seeing. I do absolutely adore Alphonso Davies, and watching him combine with Moore this weekend was quite good. He had a really good game.
Goal and assist. Yeah, player of the game. And it's like I said, it's just refreshing to watch this league. I think that generally, obviously watching EPL, I'm always nervous because my FPL team and all this, but watching the Bundesliga for its pure quality and its youthful talent has just been awesome. So Leipzig with their 5-0 victory with all their youth was impressive. And then the other thing was shout out to Rafael Guerrero. There's a lot of talent in this Dortmund side. A lot of highlights are obviously Jadon Sancho, Holland under signing. But here's Guerrero. 3 goals in 2 matches right off the bounce, from this long layover. And to see a guy who's as one-footed as Guerrero, did you see his goal with the outside left foot there? I mean, it's like in his right foot stride, and he bends his body, contorts it, and still manages to tuck it in the corner like that. I was so impressed with the outside of his left boot. But again, just credit to him. I know he came on the world stage there for Portugal years ago, and they signed him, and he's just really an awesome talent as well that needs to be given credit.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And what are you thinking? Luckily, the top 3 won again this weekend, so I mean, Bayern is still maintaining that 4-point lead. But at the very least, it does seem like we might have some sort of title challenge.
Yes.
So they're not running away quite like Liverpool is not running away the title in England. What do you think about the Dortmund Bayern game tomorrow?
It's going to be
time
interesting.
of recording.
For sure. It's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Do you have a score prediction?
Score prediction, hey. You know what? I'm going to say it's going to be like 2-1 Bayern. I do think Dortmund will score, even though Neuer, I know, just signed his new contract, and he's pretty happy with his new signing or his new contract. But I think that they will score. They have just so much offensive firepower. But I think that the Bayern machine will just overcome.
Okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna go 3-2 Borussia.
Really?
This might be a bit more based in hope than it is in just like looking the team head to head, because really Bayern did not appear to have lost a step, but also Dortmund really does seem to be a bit more confident. So I really think they have an opportunity to take it to Bayern. And let's see how it goes. So we'll see which, or if not both of us, how wrong we are next week.
Exactly. It's going to be interesting too, because I think Dortmund seem to have rested a few more of their Jadon Sancho came off the bench. So
for the last 2 games,
which was interesting because Bayern conversely appeared to, Lewandowski played like the full 90 in both, I think.
Yeah, Lewandowski, though, we should never use him as an example for what a standard footballer does, because he just seems to have like an engine and a backup engine to the backup engine.
As he said, so he was asked, how come you don't win Ballon d'Ors? How come you're not considered the best player in the world? And he's like, thank you so much for the credit. I do appreciate it. But at the end of the day, I'm Polish. He's like, Poles don't win awards. So he is just incredible. 45 goals now, club and country this year.
Yeah,
impressive.
It's very impressive. So see how far he can take this record. The other football that's been going on though is the Korean League, and as our listeners who had last pod would know, we selected two teams from the Korean League for us to follow and sort of get immersed into a new footballing culture that we previously didn't really have access to. And so my team, FC Seoul, who were near the bottom, though I think, yeah, truly near the bottom last week, have won 2 on the bounce. And the latest game, they did defeat Pohang Steelers 2-1. So we're doing quite well. However,
that's great.
However, as you saw, we're also being fined $81,000.
Oh, this is too good.
For replacing supporters or where supporters would be with sex dolls. So I'm not sure if this is net zero. I don't really know where this shakes out to be. But yeah, so that's what's been happening with FC Seoul.
Yeah, if you haven't seen this story, those who are listening, you got to look it up. It's pretty funny. I mean, they claim they didn't know, but they realized that the company they bought these supposed what was the company saying? They called them exotic dolls premium dolls.
Like mannequins. They said they also make sex dolls, but this was not what they were given. Although I just don't quite know how you miss that the company also does that, but yeah. Anyway, so this is where you're at. Yeah. How's your team doing?
Yeah, so the Suwon Blue Wings finally won their first match. So they've played 3 matches and got their first win. They are in 8th place, so they're 2 places outside of the championship playoff. So for those who don't know, the K-League is structured where the top 6 have a playoff at the end of the season for the ultimate title. So it's a 12-team league, and we're currently in 8th. But getting back in there, and I'm happy to see that Doniel Henry has started all 3 matches, so that's great for him.
Amazing. Yeah, so I mean, it's been good to pick up a new team, so I'm actually quite excited to see how me and FC Seoul fare this season. And with that, we'll take a quick break and come back with a special guest and a conversation about Turkish football.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Football Sides. We're excited today to have our guest, Josh Selchuk, here on the show. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, thanks. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you. So, Josh, we met about a year ago when you moved over across the pond, and joined us here in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've been in Canada almost about 2 years now.
Nicely done. So, how's life been in CONCACAF region for you?
It's been interesting. Been a eye opener for sure.
Yeah.
Some pleasant surprises and some unfortunate surprises.
No doubt. Well, I'm sure. Well, which one would I be? Pleasant or unfortunate? As a Sunderland fan and a Newcastle fan.
As a Sunderland fan, I think you're definitely an unfortunate surprise.
That's hilarious. Well, heck, we slowly we can maybe turn the tide of that war. Hey.
I think so. I think we're slowly getting there bit by bit.
Well, it's great to have you, Josh. Again, thanks for coming on. We're excited to talk today about Turkish football. We're excited also to talk about, just your background, your family background, how you got into it yourself. And we were discussing earlier how there just isn't enough media coverage, I would say, certainly in the English realm, on the Turkish league and the Turkish football in general. So, yeah, tell us about it. How did you get into it? Who's your club, and why is this such an important league for you to follow?
Yeah, well, I guess as is the case with most football follower stories, I didn't really have much choice but to get into it. My dad is Turkish, and I was actually born in Turkey too.
Okay.
But it's funny, I always say that Turkey is genuinely the most passionate football country in the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you go or who you're talking to, or whether you're in the middle of nowhere talking to a 94-year-old illiterate woman who's never had access to the internet in her life. Football always comes up in conversation. So I was kind of, for as long as I can remember, football's been a big part of my life. And, my dad and my Turkish family and the network system have had that ingrained into me from the start. It's funny, whenever I meet anyone new in Turkey, the first question they usually ask is, where are you from?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it doesn't matter who you're speaking to. The second question is always, who do you support?
Who's your team, right?
Who's your team?
And that's the part that makes or breaks the potential relationship.
Completely, yeah, completely.
It is a very good way to weed out people,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, my club is of course Newcastle United. I'm a Newcastle fan from birth, but my dad's club is Fenerbahce, who are one of the biggest teams in Turkey and certainly one of the most well supported. So of course I follow them very closely as well. But I am a big fan of the Super League in general, the Turkish Football League, and the national team as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you've had a big Turkish Super League community whilst living outside Turkey to enjoy the Super League with?
No, I wouldn't say so. I watched the majority of Fenerbahce's games and the Super League games on my own or occasionally with one or two friends. There's not a huge demand for it, which upsets me a bit because it's such a crazy and exciting and entertaining league. And I always go back to my friends and say, "You'll never guess what happened in this game," or there was 5 red cards in this game, and it was.
I did hear about that one actually.
I mean, that's a regular occurrence.
I think Josh, you sent me the highlights for that. You're like, Dan, you got to check this out.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
Just wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's crazy that you said it doesn't have as big of a market, which it is the 7th wealthiest league in Europe, last I checked. And they've seen so much investment and commercialization in the last 10 to 20 years. Have you noticed any such changes?
Yes, but I think particularly the impression of the Super League in England is that it's the place where, the has-beens and the players who are well past their best go to retire. They go for one final paycheck, much like the Chinese league as well. Yeah. Which again
or
disappoints
MLS too, I'm sure.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And whilst a lot of those, past it players do end up going there, there's a lot of very exciting young players and non-Turkish players who make their way over to the league as well. And these are clubs with, a significant history. It's a very old league. It was actually founded before the creation of Turkey as a country itself.
Is that right?
Whilst it was still the Ottoman Empire.
When was this? When was the founding year
of Turkey?
Well, both, I should say. Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on the Super League. I mean, Fenerbahce was founded in 1907.
Amazing.
And Turkey wasn't founded until 1923. Following the culmination of the First World War and the seceding of the Ottoman Empire and blah, blah, blah.
So you have all these clubs already pre-existing.
Yeah.
And all this history. It's fast. I mean, of course, Turkey itself, Istanbul, whatnot, this is an ancient region.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny, Josh, because before I met you, like my only connection to the Turkish league was, following certain players that I loved as they, like you said, made their way over to the Super League. I'm a huge fan of Atiba Hutchinson, who's made a home for himself there at Besiktas. And I should say, like, there was actually a lovely little special put together by him. And the way he spoke about your country and the way he spoke about the fan support, he truly, like, you could see it in his eyes. He's like, there's nowhere else in the world I want to play.
Yeah.
And it was really quite moving. I should be honest, how he spoke so fondly about not just this is his employment, right? This is his job, but he was raising his family there. He was, this foreigner who had come and just found a real home for himself there. So why is it that these players, these icons, from other countries come and just fall in love with Turkey and the league there?
I mean, that's a great question, and I think every player would have a different input, and quite honestly, you put in as much as you hope to get out. It's got to be reciprocated from that point of view. But Turkey's definitely a hidden gem from the point of a lot of Western media. For the people who don't quite know enough about it, who then arrive at this incredibly welcoming and hospitable country with amazing views and beaches and the food
The
and
cuisine. Oh my
The
gosh.
food. Oh God, the food.
There's a Turkish restaurant in my hometown that I would go to frequently, and yeah, I always would chat with them about the Super League just for fun, see what the updates were.
absolutely. But I mean, someone like Atiba, who's he's been with Besiktas for a long time now. I think he's still going at the age of 37, I think.
Yeah, still going. Yeah. Is he the captain now?
He is, yeah, and his nickname in Turkey is the Octopus.
No way.
Yeah, and he's because when he's on the field, he's everywhere. He has a hand in everything. He's starting the attacks. He's back there defending. He's winning the corners. He's keeping everyone going. He's picking up the guys from the floor, and he gave everything to his club, and the fans absolutely feed off that. If they see you as a player not giving it, they'll let you know more so than a lot of other places, for sure. Yeah. So if you're somebody who was inclined to just take it easy and see if you could get an easy ride,
Interesting.
then the fans won't appreciate that. They don't care if you think that this isn't a worthy club in your eyes, or a bit beneath you to an extent. They want to see that you're putting it in, because to them this is life and death. This is everything. This is everything that they live for, and that's why
awesome,
that's why we love the game.
And other icons have come over. Of course, we've seen the likes of Didier Drogba, Wesley Sneijder, Van Persie's come over.
Yep.
Samuel Eto'o, didn't he play for a Turkish club for a bit there?
Yeah, he was at Antalyaspor, and he actually became player manager.
No way.
Yeah, he did.
So have a lot of these
success.
players embraced it just like Atiba did, or have there been some that have just been flame outs?
And
Yeah.
perhaps even the most recent one was Falcao's big welcome to Galatasaray. How's that faring?
Yeah, there's absolutely been quite a few players who just are not in it for the right reasons. I mean, the most prominent one that comes to mind is Samir Nasri.
Yeah.
He actually went and joined the same club as Eto'o, which is actually my dad's home city, Antalyaspor, and he was hounded out by the fans. Basically, he wasn't in it from the start. It became very clear, and he left pretty quickly.
Interesting.
Because you're not going to survive too long in. They don't care what your history is, what your background is. They just want you to give it all for their club. But with Falcao at Galatasaray, he came in as a huge icon, much like Drogba had and Schneider, and at Fenerbahce had Van Persie and Nani, as you said, and at Besiktas we've had Demba Ba and Mario Gomez and Quaresma, and the list goes on for each team. Yeah.
And isn't Demba Ba, he's up there on the scoring charts this year, no?
He's still there.
That guy, legend, eh?
I'm not sure if you remember Papi Cisse as well from
course.
Newcastle. He's actually the second top scorer currently.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, he's
No
still
way.
going. Yeah.
Still
Which
one
again,
of the best goals of all time, that guy.
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. But it's those kind of news stories that perhaps degrade the Turkish league a little bit, because in my opinion, I go back to my English mates and I'm like, especially the Newcastle fans, and I'm like, Papi Cisse is the second top scorer in the league. He's still going. He's playing really well for a team in an environment.
16 goals here. Wow.
Yeah, but at the same time, my mates will come back and say, well, that just shows, the quality of the league is nowhere near a good enough standard if a 35-year-old Papi Cisse can still keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the reality, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of the Europa League, and I've had so much fun watching. The reason why I like the Europa League, because I find its standard, obviously, is superb, but it's also not just dominated by the money-rich country teams like PSG or something, right? So you have such a great group of matches in each competition, and watching some of the Turkish teams progress through, watching them obviously in the Champions League as well. Some tidy football that they play.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about a much wider story of the recent rise out of nowhere of a small club called Istanbul Başakşehir.
Oh, I really want to talk about it. Is this the one, from my knowledge, that was backed by the President Erdogan's party?
Absolutely, yeah. I think they even named the stadium after Erdogan, which shows how much football has tied into the politics of this club, or football has tied into the politics of the nation more so. And this club are kind of in a way like the RB Leipzig of Turkey.
Interesting.
Without a big club coming in, it's more the government, and they've done everything right. They've made some fantastic acquisitions and signings.
Emmanuel Adebayor, right?
Well, and the lesser known players. I mean, there's a guy called Edin Visca. He's a Bosnian right winger, and he's an absolutely superb player.
He was one of the top for the FIFA fans out there. He was a big pick in the FIFA Ultimate Team. I remember him. He was a budget player from Bosnia, but you could tear teams apart with him.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player, and he's loved at Başakşehir. But I mean, this again in a country where everybody is so football mad, and the noise and the atmosphere and the attendances are crazy week in, week out. Başakşehir are a club who, in the top division of Turkish football and even at European games, will regularly have under 10 away fans.
You're kidding.
Yeah, they're not well supported at all.
That's bizarre.
That is, I find that absolutely so strange.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because they kind of, when in a world where we have all of these historical giants, the big three in Turkey specifically are Fenerbahce, Beşiktaş, and Galatasaray. We have this club who kind of came out of nowhere in the past decade, who, were doing everything right slowly, but didn't have any chance to build up that fan base. I mean, if you're from Istanbul, you're most likely going to support one of those three big teams, or even the various other teams as well, who are also from the region. And, loyalty is a very big thing in Turkey as well. So they haven't really had the chance to gain that new demographic, those new fans.
That's so interesting.
So
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about, because it's my understanding that Erdogan, the president, is a huge influential figure in not just in politics but also in football. He is, as many of us, football mad, and I understand he is a big Fenerbahce fan. But so I find it a bit surprising that when it came to really putting his political muscle and money, he backed a new team as opposed to trying to gain more influence with his preferred team.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a cliche, to be honest, and it gets bandied around a lot, but football genuinely is like a religion in Turkey. And people associate with their teams very very seriously. They take everything to sincere depths with their loyalty and their passion for their club. And as a politician, to attach yourself to any club really, particularly one of the big three, can be quite a risky move. So if he was to come out publicly and announce his support for Fenerbahce, he can't hide it, he can't deny it, and say, yes, I did support them, I did follow them as a child. But if he was to come out during a political campaign and say, I'm a big Fenerbahce fan, then there's a very good chance he wouldn't receive the votes of a lot of Galatasaray and Beşiktaş fans who are absolutely despise Fenerbahce. This, new government-backed club, to an extent, has arisen in recent years, and Erdogan was keen to attach his name to that. But he's definitely a political figure who has made football and sport in particular a big part of his political campaigns, and something that he wants Turkey to improve on and to be proud of and to embrace.
What do we make of the narrative that he was on the transfer list for Fenerbahce, perhaps back in 1977? Was he ever that good?
I'm not sure, but the only thing I've seen of him was when he actually made an appearance in more of a charity game a few years ago. And
No way.
He actually wasn't bad. He was quite good, considering his age and his expected ability. I don't know, maybe some of the other players were looking at him and saying, this guy is the president of the country, so maybe I should go easy on him. But yeah, he wasn't bad at all.
That's so interesting.
I'm not sure he could have made it as a professional, though.
Can you comment at all, Josh, on his relationship to Mesut Ozil? So we've seen, obviously, Mesut be, vocal about his support of him. And I think that's, for whatever reason, got him into trouble with his club from time to time. And of course, we saw him make his decision with the German national team to actually cease playing for them over their lack of support for him. So can you comment on that? Do you know much about it?
It's a little bit of a bizarre relationship, to be honest. They definitely have a very close friendship, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that Erdogan, the president of Turkey, was actually best man at Mesut Ozil's wedding. Which is,
I think I've heard this, actually, yes.
Sorry, I absolutely missed this, and these are the kind of stories that I live for.
Yeah, I think I don't think they knew each other outside of football. I think they'd only met at I think it was the 2010 World Cup, and Turkey weren't there, and Turkey likes to attach themselves to their their heroes outside of the homeland, the motherland, I guess. And Erdogan and Özil and a few other players as well, Gundogan as well from Man City, have also kind of become good friends. And Cenk Tosun, who is a German Turk but actually plays for Turkey, I think he's currently at Crystal Palace.
On loan from Everton, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know too much about the history of the relationship, but it's certainly genuine. Whether there are other political motives attached, as I'm sure there are, I'm not sure what the connotations of those would be, but it's just another bizarre branch of the Turkish football tree.
That's very interesting.
As you mentioned, the president Erdogan has made sport and all this bit central to his political agenda. It's part of who he was. So I was noticing the other day that actually about 20% of the Turkish economy has come from construction and its affiliated industries. And this is why we've seen so much growth in stadiums, building of stadia across the country. Do you have any inkling on how this development is received by the populace and the clubs?
Overall, quite well. But I mean, Turkey is a very complex country with a lot of underlying issues and unfortunately still certain high levels of poverty in certain areas. And a lot of the view from the locals are, well, why the hell are you spending more money on building a stadium, which you won't be able to fill, in all honesty, because there's a lot of people just quite simply don't have the disposable income to be able to attend these football matches in some of the smaller cities and locations. And they're saying, you could put it towards building a hospital. And they have a similar attitude with, again, something I don't really want to go too much into with regard to Erdogan's political beliefs. But there's a saying in Turkey that, when it comes down to his spending and his economic policies, instead of building more hospitals and schools, he builds mosques and stadiums.
Interesting. This reminds me a little bit of the World Cup in South Africa, and now we see those stadiums vacant.
Yeah, I definitely say it's similar. And I mean, Turkey bids, I think, every single time to host the European Championships, and they should have had it in Euro 2020. They should have been going to Turkey, but at the last minute, UEFA decided that Turkey couldn't bid for the Olympics and the Euros in the same year. And so Turkey had to make a choice of which one to bid for. They had the European Championships, sewn up. Every other country had pulled out. And that's why we ended up with this bizarre solution where, it's going to be hosted in, I think, 12 different countries. And Turkey decided, and Erdogan decided to bid for the Olympics instead, which ultimately went to Tokyo. So Turkey were in a position where they had a guaranteed, hostship of the European Championships, and it went to... and they lost out on it.
As far as you know, they're going to bid for the next, I assume, yeah? Yeah,
they bid for 2024 and just lost out to Germany. So I assume they'll be at it again for 2028. They have the infrastructure. They just kind of need to overcome those public perception barriers where a lot of people are still unsure whether it's safe to travel and a safe place to be, and I think Turkey is slowly overcoming those perceptions.
Speaking of international competitions, I remember as a young lad just being mesmerized by the team that finished third at the South Korean and Japan World Cup, and watching Hakan Şükür, Ilhan Mansis, these players. Is this still one of the all-time greatest international achievements for Turkey?
Absolutely, yeah. Again, in a country where it's crazy because Turkey really haven't had a historically very good football team. I mean, I think one of the most famous things in England regarding Turkish football is the fact that England beat them 8-0, I think, in the 80s, and for a team who had never really accomplished anything, they'd only qualified for one World Cup prior to 2002, to suddenly be on the big stage, defy all the odds, and finish third. The country absolutely erupted. I mean, I was a young lad at the time, and I was actually in Turkey when they lost the semi-final to Brazil.
Okay.
And I was sat on my grandma's balcony in the heart of the city of Antalya, and there was just people streaming into the streets. The noise was exceptional. Everyone was in their cars and waving flags, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, and still nothing like I've ever seen to this date. And I kept asking my dad, I was so confused because Turkey had lost the game. They'd lost to Brazil, and they were they were out of the semi-final, and they weren't going to make it to the final. And the people were so proud that this had put Turkey on the world map, that Turkey was going to be known for something good, and Turkish football, which means so much to so many people, had finally made it in their view. And there was something similar happened as well in Euro 2008, where I was a bit older at that point and able to appreciate a lot more the significance and the unlikeliness of what had been achieved, and that again, plucky little Turkey had made it to the world stage.
That's fantastic. I mean, you say plucky little, it's 82 million people, Jared Josh.
Well, exactly.
That's like over twice as many people as my own country.
Yeah, but that's the point. Turkey, for a nation full of football mad people, and it really, really is, they never produced particularly good players until quite recently, to
That's
be
your
honest.
point. Like, it's disproportionate, hey? Would you say
absolutely.
Because of how popular the sport is, yet they don't turn out the quality players that they should.
Yeah, and a lot of that's due to deeper underlying factors like the actual footballing infrastructure of the country. There's not a lot of areas to go and train and to actually play football. A lot of people don't have the access or the disposable income to be able to get their kids into it properly, and then the coaching system is a little bit far-fetched as well. And this all harps back to the view at the top of Turkish football with these Super League clubs who have both impatient owners, impatient chairmen, and impatient fans who want to see immediate success. And this is why we see such an influx of foreign superstars who are, quite often brought in on awful financial contracts for the club at the expense of developing local talent.
So, how would you say the local development system is set up, and what do you think accounts for the recent successes in producing talent out of Turkey?
Yeah, like I said, in all honesty, I'd say the development system is still pretty poor. I mean, every generation is going to produce one or two anomalies. I mean, recently we had Arda Turan, who was a big success at Atletico Madrid and actually got a move to Barcelona. Before him, we had Emre Belözoğlu and Hakan Şükür and Tugay Kerimoğlu, who were, at some big European clubs as well, and were actually produced in Turkey. But it's very rare that you see an academy player make it through to the first team in Turkey. But there is one club that's trying to change that, and something I'm very keen to talk about.
Yes, tell us about this club. We mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, they're called Altınordu, and they're in the second division of the Turkish league, and they're actually, kind of the Turkish version of Athletic Bilbao in Spain.
Ah,
And their attitude to transfers and to player development is that they will only field Turkish players. They will not sign any foreign players.
Like across the line, they just will not.
They will not, absolutely.
Wow.
So Athletic Bilbao, I believe, only signed Basque players or players with
yeah.
Basque heritage, and
Yes.
it's the same with Altınordu now. Their president was famously quoted as saying, "Even if Messi offered to play for free, I wouldn't sign him."
Is that right?
Yeah.
The president of the club.
The president of the club, and he's instilled this incredible foundation, which is, in my opinion, absolutely the right way to develop Turkish football. Where he said, we want to develop these players from a young age as not only good players but as good people. We want them to have the correct foundations instilled into them and the right beliefs along that line as well. And it's already seen some early success. I mean, the likes of Çağlar Soyuncu, who's at Leicester, and I believe he recently just made it into the Premier League team this season. He came from Altınordu, and
Did they sign him directly from them?
No, he actually went straight to Freiburg.
Oh, he went to Freiburg. Okay.
Yeah, without actually playing in the Turkish top division. And Altınordu have also produced Cengiz Ünder, who's at Roma these days, and again is another fantastic player, very exciting, promising player. And these players have been developed with the right mentalities, the right mindset, and they're very humble off the pitch. They're not these flashy young footballers who are given a lot of money, as is the case with some other young Turkish promising talents who have not turned out the way that we'd hoped for a variety of reasons. But they've fast developed a big place in my heart because they're really trying to do things the right way. They're from a big city as well, the third biggest city in Turkey, Izmir, and they have a chance to garner this support, but it's risky, and they've really struggled to get out of the Turkish second division. They keep kind of finishing just outside of the playoffs.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so they've not quite made it to the top league, where I think they would start to get mass attention from that point of view.
Where are they in the second division right now? Is it called the TFF Second League?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
How does the league structure work? Obviously, every league seems to have a different setup in terms of promotion relegation. So, how does it work in Turkey?
It's pretty similar to England, to be honest, and most of the European leagues. The bottom three clubs in Turkey get relegated. The top two teams in Turkey automatically get promoted, and the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth place in the second division fight for a playoff place.
Okay.
And the winner of the playoffs gets promoted. And unfortunately, Altınordu haven't quite made it yet.
So, are any clubs following this model? Do you think this is picking up and could potentially be wider spread in terms of focusing on development of local talent?
I really hope so, but in all honesty, I still don't think we're at that point yet. I think a lot of the bigger clubs are still looking at the likes of Altınordu and saying, yes, it's nice what they're doing, but it's brought no success so far, because they started this project in Division 2 and they're still in Division 2. And I think it's going to take some success to that extent for them to become profitable and for this to become more widely accepted in Turkey. But again, if we take, the likes of Meri Demiral, who is a centre-back at Juventus now. Again, he was raised in Turkey. He's a Turkish player. He's not been raised by any other football system. And he was in Fenerbahce's academy. But he was told by Fenerbahce it wasn't good enough, so he left to go to Portugal, actually. He was picked up by Sporting Clube de Portugal's academy system and played for a couple teams in Portugal before he's eventually made it over to Juventus now. I think he was at Sassuolo in Italy as well just before that. He's still only 22 or 23 years of age, but he's an incredible footballer. Yet it goes to show that he wasn't even afforded the chance to play in Fenerbahce's team, and we've seen that as well with Ozan Kabak, who's a young centre-back who played a few games for Galatasaray. and has since gone on to Stuttgart and then to Schalke, now in Germany. And, again, this lad's only about 20 years old, and he's an incredible player. And the only reason he got his chance at Galatasaray was because of injuries to other players. There's really not this accepted attitude to playing those younger talents because it's a big risk, and the immediate success isn't guaranteed.
I remember you sharing that with me, Josh, in the past. I think you said last season in particular was quite an incredible season in recent years for the Super League, and you were saying how you might have some incredible talent in the wings, but they just won't play them because they need success now, and people just aren't patient. Is that very much the case?
Absolutely, yeah. Last season was a bit of a crazy season, as it always is in the Turkish league, to be honest. But,
How so?
I mean, historically, in terms of the actual competitiveness of the league, it's not been brilliant. Since 1984, I think the league title has only been won once by a team outside of the traditional big three, and that was Bursaspor back in 2010. So since 1984, the league has always been won by either Fenerbahce, Beşiktaş, or Galatasaray, which doesn't suggest brilliant things for the competitiveness of the league. But last season was a bit of an anomaly, and we actually saw Fenerbahce engaged in a bit of a relegation battle for much of the season. These Erdogan's minnows, the Turkish Istanbul Başakşehir, actually were at the top of the table for most of the season. Beşiktaş were also struggling in mid-table, and we had the likes of this small Turkish team who really haven't spent much time in the top division at all. Yeni Malatyaspor were involved in a bit of a title chase as well. It was a bit crazy, but if it hadn't have been for Başakşehir's late slip, I think they would have won the title. But ultimately,
because weren't they in first almost the majority of the season?
Yeah, they were. Yeah. And they had a couple of slip ups towards the end of the season, but ultimately Galatasaray ended up winning.
How are they doing? What is the field like this season?
Because I'm looking at it, Josh, and the top three that you're mentioning, they're not even in first.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
what I noticed. Yeah.
So again, this is what's exciting for the league. We've seen the likes of Trabzonspor and Konyaspor and of course Başakşehir recently take it to the big guys. Trabzonspor have had a brilliant policy recently of trying to incorporate more local talent, more local development. They've got a fantastic goalkeeper, Urcan Çakır. They until this season had a brilliant midfielder called Yusuf Yazıcı, who actually just got a big move to Lille, and he's been doing well for them this season until unfortunately had a season-ending injury. And there's a young guy called Ömür, who's linked with Liverpool quite a lot, to be honest, and he's again only 19 or 20 years of age, and he's already played 4 or 5 times for the Turkish national team. And Trabzonspor have really been giving it a big go, a big push this season, and they play quite good football as well. But as is always the case with these Turkish teams, when it comes to their competitiveness versus the big three, ultimately it's usually their squad depth that lets them down. They don't quite have the depth or the finances to be able to compete on an even playing field with Fenerbahce and Beşiktaş and Galatasaray. So as the season draws on longer, we usually tend to see them suffer as a result. Although this year, due to obviously the current world circumstances, it might have allowed a lot of players to regain a little bit of their
heal up or gain
their health, exactly, and their fitness. So
maybe we'll see another Leicester City.
Perhaps, yeah.
What did Ranieri play? He had, what was it, Glo? He had like 14 players he played for the whole season or something like that.
Yeah, I absolutely kept them going the entire season.
It's amazing. Duct tape and super glue or something. I mean, it was like the same lineup every match.
Which was impressive. But when you say the competition or the cup is truly spread out amongst the top three. Are there any other big fixtures, or what are the traditional big fixtures in the Super League for the season's big games?
Yeah, so again, of course, the big three have by far the biggest rivalry in Turkey when they play each other. In my opinion, the intercontinental derby between
Love that name,
yeah
absolutely.
Such a
between
great
Fenerbahce
name.
and Galatasaray. In my opinion, it's the most intense and passionate derby in the world. There's
From
really
what I've read about it, I would
yeah,
agree.
and
And
I mean,
that
there's so many historical connotations as
Mhm.
well. Not only is it two different continents colliding in the same city.
That's fantastic.
Fenerbahce from the Asian side of Turkey and Galatasaray from the European side. You also have the historical connotations of kind of rich versus poor. Galatasaray traditionally being the club of the aristocrats, and Fenerbahce being more of the working man's club. Not quite to the same extent, but yeah, there's so much passion and intense rivalry behind this. And then we have Besiktas as well, who again were kind of the ugly sister for quite a while, until they started throwing their weight about and they were taken seriously, and the rivalry is just as intense between those guys as well. I mean, since the year 2003, I believe the Guinness World Record for the loudest football stadium
Oh, that's
has been
fantastic.
held by one of those three teams, and they actually keep breaking each other's record. So I think Galatasaray currently hold the record with 133 decibels. Was the noise coming
Amazing.
consistently from the football stadium?
Have you been to one of these matches? Have you attended one of
I
these
haven't.
derbies?
No.
Wouldn't that be incredible?
It's absolutely one of my lifelong dreams. But outside of Istanbul specifically, I mean, Turkey still has a number of big cities as well, and there's rivalries all over the place. But I mean, we have in Izmir, for example, Gençlerbirliği and Altınordu, who is this kind of young up and coming club. We have Antalyaspor and Alanyaspor, and up in the north we have Trabzonspor, and there's a smaller club in the city in 1891, I think, Trabzon, which goes to show again just how long these clubs have been going for.
Is there a measure of some of these clubs outside of Istanbul? Is there a measure of trying to sign one of these big name players to put themselves more not only on the map locally but also internationally?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, for a lot of the club presidents of the lesser successful teams and the lesser known teams in Turkey, they see it as a way of being able to announce themselves to the world.
Interesting.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the club of Turkey's capital, Ankara Gücü, actually signed the former England striker Darius Vassell. And when he arrived, and I mean, this was a player who was well past his best. I think he was playing for a relegation battling Manchester City, was barely getting any game time, and was really struggling in England. He was a player who was well past his best. And he signed for this Turkish team, who aren't one of the big three, and he was treated like a god when he arrived. The videos of his arrival at the airport are absolutely insane. And that's kind of what Ankara Gücü were known for at that time. They had Darius Vassell, who didn't perform particularly well in the league, to be honest. He didn't really do anything noteworthy, but they had made this incredible coup by signing this England international.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of internationals, I mean, you mentioned Trabzonspor's success this year. Alexander Sorloth, he couldn't even get a game in with Crystal Palace, right? And here he
Yeah.
is. He's top of the goal scoring charts. Is he actually that good?
Yes and no. I mean, I watch him and I think he definitely has something about him. He seems like he's one of those players where under the right manager and the right system, he's definitely in. He could definitely produce great things. But ultimately, again, I think it goes to show it gives another win to the haters in a way of the Turkish league, where they can point out and say, well, this guy's a flop in the Premier League, and
I see
look,
what you mean.
look how
Okay.
well he's doing in the Turkish league.
So it
Now,
further expands that narrative, hey, that you're
it
hearing.
does, exactly.
Okay.
And that's a bit of a shame for me, because he is the end product of a fantastic Trabzonspor system, where the whole club has been rebuilt over the past few years to incorporate a different philosophy, and a different playing style, so that they're able to produce, these end results, and there's a lot of goals come from their games as a result, and Sorloth has fed from that. But their head coach is Hüseyin Çimşir, and he's done fantastic things recently, and has incorporated this system to thrive.
Yeah, I'm always looking for some new and exciting talent, both coaches and players, to watch. Are there any exciting talent in the Turkish league that we should be keeping an eye out on? Some up and coming coaches.
Up and coming coaches, yes. Again, it's a difficult point of view, because of the demand for such immediate success. There's not a lot of patience throughout the league and throughout the supporters, as I've mentioned before. I mean, we saw Abdullah Avcı, who is the manager at Başakşehir, again, produce these incredible results, and with this team, over recent years, where he took these minnows of Turkish football to the Europa League, and then to the verge of Champions League qualification, kind of out of nowhere. But as is the case in Turkish football, whenever one of the big three teams sees somebody else doing a good job, they say, well, we want a bit of that, and so he made a move to Beşiktaş. We had Aykut Kocaman, who was doing a fantastic job for Konyaspor a couple of seasons ago, and Fenerbahce weren't doing so well, so they said, okay, we'll have him instead. And there's not a lot of chance for these young coaches to really develop. I mean, I think the current Galatasaray manager, Fatih Terim, he is a bit of a legend in Turkish football, and he was the manager of Galatasaray's UEFA Cup winning squad in the year 2000. But he's since come back to be Galatasaray manager on, I think, 4 or 5 occasions, which just goes to show, like, the current regimes are a bit scared, perhaps, of trying out these new exciting coaches. So when the younger coaches start to try and make an impact and try perhaps a different philosophy, they're not awarded the chance, because they often end up at one of the bigger clubs who have far less patience and far less time for them to employ that strategy, that new philosophy in the club.
Yeah, I think that is pretty true across many of the top leagues. There's absolutely a shorter leash that is afforded to coaches. And I was thinking that perhaps one of the effects that we might see with the current world situation is because of the financial restrictions, not having match day receipts, and everybody really having a tighter budget, we might be able to see coaches and teams get a bit more creative and less inclined to just high-end fire, as they will. Do you think this could be the case, or how do you see broadly the current world situation with COVID impacting the league?
I really hope that the Turkish clubs as a whole take a look at their current models, where all of these clubs are year on year hemorrhaging money. They keep trying to outspend themselves and outdo each other, so that they're in a position where they're able to qualify for the Champions League, which is the real moneymaker. That's completely outweighs any potential financial impact from or financial benefit from winning the Turkish league. And second of all, they are able to take a look at the perhaps hidden gems that they have within their own clubs. Turkey has an abundance of young talent and an abundance of young guys who are desperate to make their way into the game, and they're not afforded that chance very often. and I really hope that the current situation might actually have that inverse effect. I don't think we'll see anything this season. I think the coaches and managers will be desperate to finish as high up in the table as possible. So again, unfortunately, we won't see many young guys being given that chance. But moving forward, there's not as much room for them to splash this cash anymore. And so, yeah, I think we'll see, hopefully, an increase in the number of local talent featuring for the clubs.
Hopefully that could be moving forward. But you mentioned that the Champions League is the big money maker, and in Europe and in other big leagues, the other big moneymaker are the TV money. Is there a comparable aspect? What is the other second biggest source of revenue for clubs in the Super League?
Yeah, so again, outside of the big three who rely so much on their national pull and the national reach, their ticket sales, their merchandise sales, the big sponsorships and advertisements that each of those three have throughout the country. I mean, it sounds a bit surreal to describe it to anyone who's not familiar with Turkish football, but genuinely, if you go to any part of Turkey outside Istanbul, you can go to any city, and although there are some big traditional clubs, and maybe this doesn't apply as much to the likes of Trabzon or Bursa, for example, but if you go to any big city and you ask the ordinary man on the street which football club he supports, 99 times out of 100 he's going to say one of those teams, and it just goes to show the complete national dominance of those teams. So they get all the sponsorships, they get all the TV deals, the advertisements, the merchandise sales, everything. And so the teams in and around them don't have as much opportunities and don't have as many options, to be honest. So they have to kind of think outside the box in ways and unfortunately sell a lot of their talents to those bigger clubs in order to sustain themselves, and then occasionally make a go for that final European place as well.
Josh, hearing your passion for Turkish football and for the scene over there, it's evident for sure. And I'm sure the listeners, I know for Glo and I'm sure I just can't wait for my chance to get to visit your country and to.
I've only been at the airport.
I know.
Awesome.
My wife actually, when she did the whole, backpacking and rail pass through Europe, she did say many times how Turkey was probably her favorite spot, and certainly be following this league more. But Josh, we do have to ask. We need to test how close your allegiances lie. Okay, so let's say and this may be a topic for the future. The Newcastle takeover. But okay, so Newcastle's in the Champions League final. As is your Turkish club, okay?
Yeah.
And forgive me, you said it's Fenerbahce?
Fenerbahce, yeah.
Okay, so here you are in a situation, probably for both clubs, it's iconic for both, right? Who do you support? Who are you cheering for in that final?
I would have to cheer for Newcastle.
You would? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still a Geordie boy at heart, although it would certainly be a very dividing day.
Yes, it would.
My dad would absolutely be cheering for Fenerbahce, and it would be one of those bittersweet occasions for sure. But
you'd probably be happy either way, wouldn't you?
Yes, yeah, but I wouldn't want to ever be in that position.
Of course.
Of course, I want to see both of those teams in the Champions League final. But yeah, that would be a bit of a killer.
Okay, so similarly, World Cup. Turkey and England, or for that matter, your new home, Canada. So where do your allegiances lie? At the end of the day, who's team? You got that silky accent, right? So
that's true.
So who would you support?
This is a question I get asked a lot by football fans I meet around the world. I am very proud to say that I'm a fan of both, just as I am with Newcastle and Fenerbahce. I was actually in France at the European Championships in 2016, attending all of the English games, and following
Fantastic.
England, following my
That's
team.
awesome.
But at the same time, I was there cheering for Turkey as well. And on the days where Turkey played, I was there in my Turkish jersey as well. But ultimately, and my passion for football came primarily through my dad. And of course, I was brought up in a football mad area in the northeast of England. But my national team, the team I always wanted to see win, was Turkey.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that really hit home, particularly at the World Cup in 2002, when Turkey had actually made it further than England. And then again at Euro 2008, when England didn't even qualify. And that was just at the age where I was starting to really get into football in Euro 2008. And, England hadn't qualified, and I was devastated as a young lad. I wanted to see all my favorite players play. And, but then, my dad was ecstatic because Turkey had qualified. And he said, well, it's okay. My dad and all his friends, all his English friends, we're all going to be, donning the Turkish jerseys and supporting Turkey throughout the competition. And I just developed a huge place in my heart for the plucky underdogs, the comeback kings as they were in that tournament. I think they went behind in every single game and came back to win in some incredible circumstances. And it's a very difficult question, but I think if it really came down to it, World Cup final, Turkey against England, I think I'd have to go for Turkey.
You would cheer for Turkey, but you'd be wearing your Geordie shirt, wouldn't you?
with Emre Belözoğlu on the back.
That's awesome.
You could do the Boateng family, where you just have like half a German flag jersey and then half.
That's true, yeah.
That's
It's
awesome.
like best of both worlds. Well, thank you so much, Josh. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back with some more Sideline Asides.
Sounds good.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Football Asides. This is Sideline Asides, a segment in our show where we give you a peek into the footballing questions and matters that are keeping us awake at night. Just right there. So for today's segment, Josh will be joining us and we're building our perfect footballer. How this works is we each pick a trait of a footballer, a footballing quality and trait that we think is most valuable, and then pick a footballer that embodies it with the hopes that together we can build the perfect footballer. So it's like Build-A-Bear, but like for footballers, which might end up being more akin to Frankenstein's monster once this is all done. But you get the gist.
Awesome.
Dan, would you like to start us off with a valued footballing trait
Sure.
for
Yeah.
this team that we're building?
Sure. So, Josh, I knew you were coming on today, and like I said before, there have been a few Turkish footballers that have really caught my eye. And a few years ago, especially for Bayer Leverkusen, Hakan Çalhanoğlu, his free kick ability is phenomenal. And if people haven't seen this guy, just look up his YouTube highlights. He's pinging this in from all over the pitch, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is he highly regarded amongst the Turkish community?
Yeah, there's again a huge backstory to Çalhanoğlu's involvement with the Turkish national team. He actually had a 2-year spell where him and Ömer Toprak didn't actually play for the team for reasons involving a player dispute with a different player and a gun and being held at gunpoint and all sorts. But that's just another day in the wild world of Turkish football. But in terms of Turkey, yeah, he's been especially in the past few years since the demise of Arda Turan, he's been the real poster boy for Turkey. He's been the guy that everyone pins their hopes on, and to lead us to glory.
Yeah.
But as a free kick specialist, he's incredible.
Like I've heard people, some even say a couple of years ago at least, that he was up there top 3 in the world. Yeah. And I would say, so I love a good free kick specialist. He's the guy. He's going to be on the set pieces, okay, and or at least he's going to bring that trait into our perfect footballer. And for those FIFA fans out there, he's 90 rated at free kicks out of 100. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, and that's actually his lowest rating in recent years as well. It used to be even better.
It was? Oh, well, there you go. He's for Milan now, right?
Yeah, he plays for Milan now. And one of the issues with Çalhanoğlu has always been that he never quite seems to nail down a position. He's not quite
he's not quite a 10. He's not quite a striker.
Exactly, and he gets played out on the left a lot, but he has no pace. He's a very slow guy, and he relies a lot on his technical ability.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's been a bit of a struggle for him, but it's great to see him at a club like Milan.
Over to you, Josh. What trait should we add to this footballer?
Well, I was gonna stick with the Turkish theme actually, and go for one of my all-time favorite players, Tugay Kerimoğlu, who played at Blackburn and at Rangers and at Galatasaray. And if I could pick a defining quality in a player like Tugay, it would be his nonchalance. You know, his sheer ability to just walk around the pitch, and not give two hoots about, you know, whatever's going on, because he just had the most incredible ability. I mean, I've heard stories that he would come off at half time, and all the players would be, you know, completely out of breath and trying to recover and talk about the game, and he would walk into the showers and have a cigarette at half time, and he'd be having a smoke. And
Mauricio Sarri would love him.
Yes, they could be buddies, eh?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is a guy who played at the peak of his ability in the Premier League until the age of 39, I think. And there's a great quote by Mark Hughes, who was the Blackburn manager at the time, and he said, "Don't you wish Tugay was 10 years younger?" And he said, "Absolutely not, because then he'd be at Barcelona." This is a guy who could do everything in football,
right, eh?
but he played the game like he didn't try, like he didn't care, like it was his job. Yeah, I've got a football game today, so I better get on with it.
Gotta go to the office today.
I love it.
Exactly.
Well, heck, you know, for these set pieces, then he's going to step up to them with just that nonchalance, no pressure, hey?
Well, I guess so. But to provide a more relatable example, I mean, maybe it's kind of along the lines of Andre Pirlo as well.
Okay, yes.
Who gave had
Beautiful
a similar
player.
attitude. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I am off base a little bit. I did not go with the Turkish theme,
No worries.
but I'm going to count this as we're diversifying our football player. So I think a valuable quality is spatial awareness and generally footballing intelligence. I think that is the hardest. I think it is quite the hardest skill to teach, in my opinion, to a young footballer, or to just being able to teach them how to see space, see it correctly, and improvise on the fly. So the player the trait, or a player who I think embodies this trait particularly well, is I think Kevin De Bruyne does a fantastic job at, which pains me as a United fan to recommend a City player, but he is truly just seems to see like 8 different things happening, and I'm sitting on the couch watching the game. I don't see the pass, and I can see the entire field.
It's so true.
It's unbothered. It's amazing.
I swear one of the days they're going to find out he's got these like contact lenses with the view that we're seeing from the
He has
bird's
his
eye.
Google glasses on.
Seriously, like his through balls, it's like 4 players are out of the match through his. It's incredible. I agree.
So yeah, I think we've built a perfect footballer. So soon, I don't know, big clubs, please hit us up. We solved it. You're welcome.
Yeah, I also want to give a small shout out to Matt Ritchie's screaming.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, he's the loudest footballer I have ever witnessed, both in person and on the TV. And I think it would be great if our Frankenstein's monster footballer had a bit of Matt Ritchie's shouting ability inside him, because it can really help to get the team going when things aren't going too well.
Maybe they should sign him in those Turkish derbies, make it even louder.
Oh, Matt Ritchie would be the perfect player for the Fenerbahce Galatasaray derby.
He's still a bit young, but I think we could also use Haaland's just interview skills or lack thereof.
Oh, that's awesome.
Fantastic.
So could just
Okay, my last shout out then. I love chest technique. I love it when players can just like use their chest as an extra passing or control. So we gotta shout out to Fellaini. The guy, he doesn't
and
even
his hair. We need to bring his hair as well.
And you know what? We'll take his hair with it, right? And why not? We gotta stand out. But I remember watching some interview and they were asking about it. Like, you're literally using your chest when you could have used like any other part of your body. But he's like, yeah, I think with my chest first or something. It's true, hey? The guy just does not. It's funny how he continually uses his chest for every touch.
Absolutely, especially when he was at Everton. He was a fantastic player. I'd never seen anybody with quite his playing style.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Any other last traits we should add?
None of us
there's-
picked anything that could be. Just not.
Well,
I
we
mean,
did-
you could pick just about anything from Messi or Ronaldo.
Yeah, his left foot would be nice to have, you know?
Yeah, Messi's left and Ronaldo's right foot. That's not
Yeah.
a bad combination.
Have you guys heard of this player? Now, we didn't mention strength. I have to shout out to League One because obviously I'm following it more than I ever have, with Sunderland being in it for 2 years now. Adebayo Akinfenwa. Have you guys seen this guy?
Yeah.
His physique. 38 years old. He's 86 kilograms. I mean, he's what can the videos of him doing his workouts, eh? Have you seen this guy, Josh?
He's an absolute machine.
I've never seen a bigger footballer.
I think he's year on year the strongest player in the FIFA game. Just an
97
absolute
strength in FIFA 20. 97 out of 100.
monster. Yeah.
Where do we think Adama Traore would be there? Because he just looks like a tank, but he's also like really fast. So it's just
That's true.
a bit of a confusing thing for me in my mind. Just like it doesn't make sense. He should not be this fast.
Oh,
If Adama could work a little bit more on his final product, he'd be one of the most incredible players in the world.
I agree.
He has improved this season, so hopefully he keeps that upward trajectory.
Did you both know that he doesn't actually do any weightlifting? He's never lifted any weights in his life.
So they say, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he can. I'm just now terrified to see what he would do if he lifted anything.
Could you imagine? He probably is one of those guys, much like Josie Altidore, right? Where he actually needs to be careful about putting on too much mass, like too much bulk.
Yeah, that's very
So
fair.
maybe working out is like you have to be very mindful about how much weight
I would
you lift.
love for someone to tell me that. Just like, we actually don't need to do any exercises. We're
Right?
so worried about you.
I know.
So good shape.
Oh, I know. Can you imagine, eh? Josh, it's been just a real treat. We thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. Again, your passion for Turkish football. And I know myself, like I'm going to be following it a lot more closely. Looking forward to when they restart. Do you have any idea when they're going to restart?
I think they're talking about mid-June, and
Okay.
there's a meeting on Wednesday, I believe. Wednesday the 27th. So yeah, in a few days' time. So hopefully we see it come back before long. But Turkish football's never the same without the fans. So
Yes, of course.
I'm still counting down the days till we see Turkish football back to its full
Absolutely.
brutal and unexpected best.
Well, hopefully, we here in CONCACAF will treat you well, and you'll find a few more Turks to celebrate with, hey?
Yeah.
And
I
who
hope
knows?
so.
Maybe one of these MLS teams will sign a Turkish designated player.
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows?
Maybe the Whitecaps. We'll bring you on.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, thanks again, Josh. It's been wonderful picking your brain. And as Dan just mentioned, we're all thrilled to know more about the Turkish game. And hopefully some of our listeners learned so much from it. And we can all start following and have better and bigger conversations about the league.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for yet another episode of Football Asides. Do stay in touch. Do give us a review on wherever you listen to your pod. And we're on Instagram. We're on Twitter at Football Asides.